Yeah, I think Heidi's in there, so, yeah, so she can figure it.
Look at all those potatoes.
They sure do.
Which one do you
I'm
like?
such a sucker for
Me
potatoes.
too.
Hello.
Who doesn't like potatoes, right? Do you like potatoes? No. No!
There's
He
one.
don't like
There's
anything.
one that doesn't like
You
it.
don't like any.
He doesn't like anything.
Not anything, huh?
Don't even candy.
Just
Do you
cut
like
gummies,
candy? Do you like candy?
some of it.
Some of it.
See.
Hi, Di.
That's good though.
More gummies than anything.
That's good though. We all don't need a bunch of
Oh,
candy.
I know. I wish I had an aversion to it.
I know, me too. I like sweets. Who doesn't like some sweets?
Yeah. Good morning. You didn't. Good
You
morning.
want me here? Oh,
Hey,
good.
well, no, this is mine.
Okay, here you go.
I'll take your mom's off.
Yeah, there you go.
Here's Ray.
Honey,
My sister.
how are you doing?
Jason.
What have you been up to all week?
He's giving me.
Sleeping in? Lucky. I'm gonna sleep
Ah.
in.
He's found a community. He's looking.
Oh, yesterday I did
Joanne
my
does
dog
such a
stick
good job.
groomed, and I went for a walk, and I went to the park, and
And
saw
it's a
baby lamb. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I have a little puppy, so she needs a lot of exercise, and I need it too, so it's a win-win. See? No puppy. Her name is Riley. She's a little cutie and a
Keeps
troublemaker.
up with it. I don't keep.
She likes chewing on everything.
You don't know what happened to you that long?
Well, I say Riley, no. And sometimes I'll go to get her attention. I don't smack her, I clap my hands for a sound.
Oh,
Not
God,
a
straight
crazy.
out or something. No, to leave you.
She gets in trouble.
You're right.
Yeah, they said. That's right up your alley. And,
No, that's it. Yeah, they got a little problem with the bees.
Have fun.
One of the baby guys was surprised. Decided to go do it this year. I know,
Ray,
I think you're gonna sit in the corner and I'll sit next to you guys.
there's other people. But I'm not gonna buy it. Anyway,
next year, Aaron. Oh, the boys.
you know, I'm not proud of it.
Now he's going to something else and bees.
Ready for a nap?
He's on the big
If you want one of these books, I have a couple of copies left over, so just let me know. Or you want one? Okay. Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah. You want, yeah. I was going to say something dumb, but yeah. Uh-huh.
This one going to be studying?
Yeah, this is. You'll take one? Okay, I only got 2 left. 1. All right. Okay, good. So I can get some more if you want one. We're in chapter 2. I like this book because they're readable chapters. And you can read most of the chapters in 10 to 15 minutes. In our lessons, we're just trying to present the highlights of those chapters, so you'll get more. And let me know if you need a book, because you'll certainly get more out of it. We're talking about the background of redemption, and we started last week, and that has to do with Genesis 3 through 12, where we see the difficulties that have created the scenario to where redemption is needed. There's a lot of tragedy in these chapters. God had hope and did everything he could to make the place for men and women to live. Provided them with everything they needed. And so there were a couple of events that changed the course of history, literally. And the first one was in the garden with the serpent. And what we have here is challenging the challenge of God's authority. We understand from scriptures later on that Satan means adversary, and so he is somebody who, we think about him being an adversary toward us, but he was an adversary toward God. He was trying to destroy what God had created. And so because of that, we lost that sort of access to the Father. So that was the first serious rebellion. The second one was related to the flood, and we see that statement that the inclinations of a man's heart was on evil all the time. And so by the time we get to this point in history, we had moved from simply challenging God's authority to providing a completely different lifestyle for humans to live their lives by. And then the third event of rebellion is in Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel. And what they were trying to do was make a name for themselves. They did not want anything to do with God. And so you see this sequence of events where first we just challenge God's authority. Second, we provide an alternative lifestyle for people to live. And then third, now we have this total rejection. We want to make a name for ourselves. And so they're building the Tower of Babel, and sometimes we ask, why a tower? And it has to do with, those were high places. we read about high places in the history of Israel, and high places is where they conducted their worship and they expected their God or God to come down. And sometimes the Jews had that problem too. They had a temple, and it was at a high point in the city of David. And the Lord did meet them there, but it wasn't a matter of them trying to, or it shouldn't have been a matter of them trying to just appease their God. It should have been a matter of relationship and a matter of true worship and a matter of living in harmony with the Lord's will for their lives. And so it got kind of messed up. They actually did some Baal and Asherah worship in the temple, but most of the time it was on high places, just high mountains. One of the most prominent mountains that was a source for, we could say, satanic activity, Baal worship, was Mount Hermon. And that was considered the ultimate high place in the region of Israel. But wherever there was, and I think there's a statement in one of the prophets like, you find a high hill that the Lord is criticizing them, and he says, you find a high hill anywhere and you begin your immoral practices. And so they were out of control. So the high places were these places of worship. And in this, they completely rejected the Lord's sovereignty, and they rejected the Lord's image for themselves. Sometimes we think of being created in the image of God has to do with some characteristics, some attributes of God that we share, like creativity or free will. But it's also, we represent him. So that how we live our lives reflects his image. And we see some of that carried over into the New Testament in Romans 8, where because of the redemption through Christ on the cross, God's hope for us now is to conform to the image of Christ. So that idea of image has a lot to do with duplicating in our own lives or imitating the attributes of God so that we look like God. So that people do see in us the attributes of God, the image of God, so that we can be a light to them. So in this background, in this backdrop, we see God beginning to unfold his plan, and this is where we were. Genesis 3 and verse 15. This is where we were last week. Anybody remember the question that we ended up with? The cliffhanger?
The seed of Satan.
Who is the seed of the serpent? So, anybody think about that? Yeah? So the Genesis 3:15. So let's read it. I will put hostility between you and the woman, talking to the serpent, between your offspring and her offspring. He will strike your head, talking about the offspring of the woman, will strike the head, although you will strike his heel. So the hostility then begins. So who are the offspring of the woman? All of us, humans, yes. Ultimately, Jesus. But I think we too live a victorious lifestyle when we begin to be conformed to the image of Christ. We begin to live that victorious lifestyle to where our lives are a defeat of the enemy. Because the enemy is trying to get us to sign up with his enemy. And so when we live faithfully, we are staking out our territory. We are declaring our loyalty to the Lord God, to Lord Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth. That's what we do. But ultimately, this is referring to Jesus and how Jesus puts an end to the reign of death created by the serpent, created by his temptation to us to challenge God's authority, to live totally corrupt lifestyles, to completely reject his name for us and make a name for ourselves. Jesus turns all of that around. And then it mentions the hostility between your offspring. Who is her offspring? That's us. That's humans. Who is the serpent's offspring? Okay, so that's humans.
Globalists.
Stop.
It's probably, I'm not exactly sure what this is exactly, but what is against God's people is the flesh, right? Our fleshly desires, and lies.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's the contrast between truth, which is Christ, and the lies of the world, which the devil is the father of all lies. So I don't know if that's where you're going, but that's what makes sense.
That's sort of what I was thinking. Offspring, nothing, not human, but something sinful put before us.
Yes.
Something sinful.
Yes, and I do think it is a tangible entity. It's more than just a mindset or a lifestyle. That there are, what does Paul say in Ephesians 6? That our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities. And that rulers, that's that prince word we've talked about in the past. Against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. So if we take that passage at face value, there is a tangible entity that is our enemy. And so those are the individuals, those are the entities that are a part of Satan's entourage that is bringing about the demise of humanity through carrying out the schemes of the devil. That's why we put on the full armor of God so that we can take our stand. And that full armor of God, those are all spiritual elements. So they're not physical elements. They're all spiritual elements. They're things that strengthen us spiritually to face this battle, because our hearts are the battlefield for this. And some of you probably know that when you made a decision to follow Christ, you recognize, and you may have even become more of a battlefield, because you become a target, because what you're doing threatens what Satan is trying to do. And so I don't know necessarily if this is fallen angels, but it's the spiritual forces of evil. It's the rulers, the authorities of this dark world who are a part of destroying humanity. And so this passage explains the battle that's taking place. And that's why sometimes you may identify with this. Sometimes we may wonder, like personally, like I can't take anymore, and I'm getting constantly attacked by something. And if we don't recognize it for what it is, then we won't turn to what we need to embrace. If we don't know we're in a spiritual battle, we won't put on the full armor of God. And so it's important for us to realize that because of the battle, the Father has given us what we need to sustain ourselves in that battle. And this passage is drawing the battle lines. It's the offspring of the serpent versus the offspring of the woman. And what is recorded here, like who wins?
The woman.
The woman wins. Yes, he will strike our heel, but that's a non-fatal wound, generally speaking. And I say generally speaking because you could get bit by a snake on the heel and die. But that's not the point here. So the point is it's a non-life-threatening wound. But crushing the head, that ends it all. That puts the enemy out. Yep. That's right. That's his death. Yeah. And that hasn't happened yet in its fullness. Jesus has won the battle. And the fallen angels that Jude talks about that are held in chains and in prison for the final judgment. Remember, we're told that Jesus goes and preaches to those individuals, those entities, those chained angels. And they're chained, and they're in that situation. That is just a part of their punishment because of their hostility toward God's plan, God's people. And so God is holding them, and they're not getting out until it's over. And so this gives us a little context of what Jesus was doing when he preached to the spirits in prison. And it might be something like, you tried to kill me, but I resurrected and I'm alive. I am the firstborn of the new humanity, and you're not getting out. You're not getting out. So I don't think it was people from, the law of Moses dispensation that Jesus went and preached to them so that they could be saved. I think it's letting those who destroyed God's planet or tried by destroying humanity. You're done. I've won. And then at the end of time, we will see that ultimate fulfillment. Yeah, Rick.
Do you think it could be people that lived before the time of Moses, earlier in history, that maybe somewhere might not have got a fair shake?
Well, I think they had their chance. Acts 17:24 tells us that God put people wherever they were in a place so that they could seek him out and find him. So, yeah, no, I don't think it's people. I think it's, and if you take the passage, one's in Peter and one's in Jude, I think they're parallel passages talking about the same thing. Jesus went and preached to the spirits in prison. Jude talks about them being, these entities being in chains in prison for the day of judgment. And so I think that fits it better. Human logic tells us this other idea. But the scriptures help us to have a different picture of it. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a hopeful. Oh, sir.
Well, coming about it from the opposite point of view, the people that are in prison, who's not in prison? Jesus is not in prison because he willingly went to prison to preach to the people that were in, or the people or the entities that were in prison.
Right.
And Elijah,
yeah.
Elijah didn't. He's not in prison.
No.
He's free. He ascended to heaven without suffering death, without going into this imprisonment state.
Yes.
And the third one is
Enoch. Yeah. Uh-huh.
He walked with God and was declared righteousness and got a free pass.
Yeah.
So he didn't go to prison.
Yeah, they're not in prison. Yeah.
So those who are not in prison versus those who are in prison, or entities in prison.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We may say, well, like with Elijah. Elijah, yeah. Elijah, yeah, that's after the whole 450 prophets of Baal being slaughtered, and Ahab and Jezebel getting all twisted on it, and they were going to kill him, and so the Lord said, all right, Elijah, you go do this, and you go pick your successor, Elisha. And then the Lord came and got him. So we might say that Elijah had a better understanding, certainly, of, and there was redemption in the Mosaic covenant that gave people of that time a righteous way to live. And of course, they were forgiven because of what Jesus did. All humanity is forgiven because of what Jesus did. And so, but Enoch lived, back before the flood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he didn't have any, from our perspective, he didn't have some sort of discernible plan of salvation of how to live his life. I think these people knew that there was God, and then there was, the foreign gods. that were trying to get their allegiance and get their attention. So I think they had their way. I think they had an opportunity. I think everybody has an opportunity to hear the message in some way. And again, that passage in Acts 17:24, Paul tells us, even from his perspective 2,000 years ago, and he was closer to all of this stuff that we're talking about. A lot of times in the church, we'll say the spirits in prison were people who never had a chance to hear the word. And that opens up a lot of other theological problems. That means you can live however you want in this life and then just get your free pass. Not for being righteous, because that's the way Elijah was and that's the way Enoch was, but yes.
Well, wasn't Jesus preaching judgment rather than repentance?
I think it was a message of judgment. So I don't think it was to people. People made their decisions in life, and just like us today, just like our population today, we make our decisions. There's a lot of evidence for the existence of God. So Psalm 19, Romans 1, and then some other passages that tell us that God's existence is evident. So and that's the point that Paul is making in Acts 17, that everyone has the opportunity to seek out God and find him. Yeah. So they got what they got, and maybe God's the judge, and maybe he'll say, you did your best. So for Christians, this is a statement of hope. The fact that the serpent's head will be crushed. That's morbid. But that's a statement of hope, because we know how this is going to end up ultimately. We know how this will pan out. He doesn't win. And I think that's intentional, and we see a statement in, I think it's Deuteronomy, where they say, I will raise up a prophet like Moses to show the way. And so he's talking about Jesus there. So there are little statements throughout the Old Testament pointing to the redemption that God is putting into play. And this is the first statement. And that should be very encouraging to us, to know that. And sometimes we struggle. We struggle as just trying to get through life. And there's pain and suffering. And and because of that pain and suffering, we wonder, is this the way it's supposed to be? Or is Satan getting the upper hand in life on the planet? We kind of have that feeling about life in America, that Satan's getting the upper hand, and he's making inroads. I don't doubt that, but that's been unfolding for a long time. So this is a hopeful statement. It highlights the victory of her offspring, and as I said, it's ultimately talking about Jesus, but it's talking about us too. Yes?
Any thoughts on what the word says first, and he will bruise you on the head and crush your head.
Mm-hmm.
And then you will strike him on the heel.
Okay. So I have hostility, and then he will strike your head, and you will strike his heel. Mine is in a poetic form. So, and all of these curses are presented in poetic form. So we might say it differently. You'll strike his heel, but he's going to crush your head. I think that's what I've thought about that.
Right, I mean, the poetic form, it is, that's an interpretation.
It could be, yes, yeah.
It's God speaking, that's, so it's, at least in New American Standard, it isolates it because it's the words of God.
Mm-hmm.
And I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed, and he, that is, her seed will bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him, that is, her seed, on the heel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I you know,
Making an assumption because the women don't have seed, that Jesus is the seed.
no, I think it's just humanity. It's the go be fruitful and multiply. Those
Women
people.
don't have seed, so what's he talking about? Her production, her produce?
Yeah, the result of her
Offspring.
offspring, and then the generations that followed that remained faithful.
Well, her desire to be wise, it wasn't Satan lying to her in the beginning. That seems to, unless this version is different, because he says in verse 5, for God knows in the days that you eat from your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And it says, when the woman saw that the tree was good, that it was a delight to her eyes, the tree was desirable to make one wise.
Mm-hmm.
Then in verse 22, God says, behold, the man has become like us,
Mm-hmm.
knowing good and evil. So he didn't lie to her about knowing good and evil.
Yeah, I think there was a mix of deception and fact and truth in there.
Well, what he done was
But
let her
it-
believe that she'd be wise like God, rather than because she disobeyed God, not that he disobeyed God, although I guess he did,
Yeah,
because God says down there, because you've done this,
yeah.
cursed are you, he says.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you've interfered, he's interfering with God's plan from the very beginning.
Yes, he definitely is. And when he says wise, he doesn't mean wise like God is wise. So that's where I'm saying that
She's the one, it says here, she's the one who thought it would be wise to eat this, because it would make her wise.
yeah.
Unless this version's different than what the original.
Well, I think she was tempted to eat it. She accepted the premise, but when he said wise, it didn't mean godly wise. And so the scripture does talk about earthly wisdom and heavenly wisdom or godly wisdom. Yeah, so I think there's a mix in his statements of lies, deception, and enough truth to get you to bite. And I think that is a scheme of the adversary. Not being straight, completely straight, just throwing some twists and turns in there, and then I gotcha. And it is, what's that?
Like lawyers.
Like lawyers, yeah. He's being a lawyer. Maybe that's what we say. The lawyer was more clever than any of the other creatures. That's funny. Good job. So that is a paradigm for us today. That's how Satan still gets us today. And I see no benefit to knowing good and evil. Anybody want to make a point that that's benefited humanity? So that's not wise. Yeah. Bob.
It does talk about serpents' wisdom. Where is that? Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. So that's Jesus telling us to be wise as serpents. So how is a serpent wise? It uses senses that most animals don't use. It has infrared ability to see in the dark and smell in the dark.
I have infrared ability. What are you talking about?
You do.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
Not as perfected as the serpent.
Yeah.
So we need to, so there's earthly wisdom and there's
Sure,
godly wisdom.
sure. That's what I think that's what it's speaking to, that we need to be aware of things and sometimes be aware of it. And I don't know if it's it's encouraging us to make use of the principles of this world for the sake of the mission. And so that's good. Yeah, Dale?
So when God told Adam originally, you can freely eat of any tree in the garden, but not the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, did that make sense to Adam? Did he know what good and evil were? I mean, if God told him, don't eat of this tree of good and evil.
That's a good question. So could Adam and Eve conceive good and evil?
They can conceive yes and no.
Yeah, they could conceive yes and no. Yeah, God said don't do it because it's not good for you and you don't want this. You don't. So let's not do something just to see how it's gonna turn out, because it's not. And that's another Christian principle here. So Satan's scheme, as presented in the temptation, he's still doing that today. And we need the full armor of God to protect ourselves against that. And then we need to trust him in regards to what's good and evil, and to flee evil, and which is a statement in Scripture. So, that's what I would say. That no, they may not have known that, and of course, if they had, and if you're a genuine, sincere, faithful Christian, you're not going to do things to intentionally hurt yourself or others. You're going to be looking for the way to be obedient. So, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think he had a concept of good and evil?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
This is an account, it's being basically spoken by Moses to the people.
Right.
And so he may be using terms to help them identify.
Most definitely.
I think, Adam, when God said, don't eat of this tree, I believe he had to say something more than good and evil, because good and evil didn't exist.
Okay.
And so, this tree right here, don't eat of it.
Yeah. And he does say, or you will die.
Yeah.
But
But you have to know which tree.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Because, obviously it had pleasurable fruit on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It looked like the other trees.
It was-
had fruit.
It was good.
It was good to eat.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Perry.
I think this is interesting, trying to figure out what can we determine from these stories. But at the end of the day, Christ defeated sin.
Yes.
He did not sin. He defeated it. He became victorious over it. And I think this is the point you're getting to, and the book is getting to, is this: he is the spiritual way
Yeah.
for us overcoming.
Yes.
And the more we understand him, the more we become back into that. So before sin, Adam and Eve are walking around with God in some sort of
Right. Yeah.
community there.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Right.
But since the fall, we've been separated.
Yes.
Okay, in some sense anyway. And Jesus brings back that reunification. That's
Sure.
the right way to say it.
Yeah.
That he's our mediator. He's everything.
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And the more we understand him, that's the walk. That's the way.
Mm-hmm.
The more we can defeat sin itself. too.
Yeah. Yeah. So good point. Christ is he's He has redeemed us. He has shown us the way. And Romans 8, we are encouraged to conform to the image of Christ now, to live that out. That's our model now. Not what culture offers, which is this mix of good and evil, but yes or no. Yeah, obedient or disobedient. Yes.
We were given that gift of discernment
Yes.
to know from right and wrong.
We are given a gift of discernment. We have the ability to be aware and to be alert. And if we have armed ourselves with the armor of God, that's part of it. We know what's good and evil. And we know what brings the best outcome, just practically speaking, for living. So the stage is then set for redemption. Adam and Eve are still expected to be fruitful and multiply, but it's different now. It's now in the shadow of grace. And that's just meaning that God is still going to work on their behalf and to try to be involved in their lives, to help them to move forward and bring about godly offspring. I think that's a great term. We're going to see it in our sermon this morning, that's always been God's intent, for godly offspring. And so he challenges us and humans on how we live. Sin, however, has become an active agent. And Genesis 4 is Cain's circumstance. And, his offering was rejected. Verse 6 says, "Then the Lord said to Cain, 'Why are you furious? And why do you look despondent? If you do what is right, won't you be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you. You must rule over it.'" And so we do that through this redemption and the teachings and the conviction about imitating Jesus Christ. And I want to look at one more passage. Psalm 103. And I love this passage because it sounds like something a New Testament writer would write. And this is what we begin to understand about the Lord. Because we do understand the struggle with sin. The words to Cain, definitely we get it. Sin is always trying to, it's almost personified here. But we understand the source of this. So we need to know what it says in Psalm 103, verse 8. "The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in love, abounding in faithful love." Some translations say steadfast love. "He will not always accuse us or be angry forever. He has not dealt with us as our sins deserve or repaid us according to our iniquities. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love, is his faithful love, is his steadfast love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. For he knows what we are made of, remembering that we are dust." So we see grace emerging early on in the story of redemption. We'll continue. If you have a book, we'll continue in chapter 3. If you want a book, come and see me and we'll get that for you. Come on in.
Well, you're the first person to